Do you like movies and games also? Listen, so much more they all know. Pyro, Lotus, and friends, welcome to Corrective Consciousness.
Welcome to Corrective Consciousness, episode 41, the podcast about our lives and love of pop culture. I am your host, Vice the Bold, and this is Lotus Prince. Wait. Yeah. Oh, that's what I get for sticking to the cart. Yeah, so Vice the Bold is not here this week. He's been, I think, even more horribly fired than any of us have been. If there are degrees of being fired, he's reached the maximum threshold of firedness.
Yeah, and he'll stay fired if this podcast gets more listens than all the rest of them have.
He's so fired it'll take him at least a week to recover. Yeah. So yeah, I am your temporary host this week, Lotus Prince, and we have...
And I'm PyroJackFrost.
And OldManStompy. I now have the longest active streak of anyone on this podcast.
That's so crazy.
He has like one of those things on his wall saying podcasts, like, you know, like the accidents until
weeks since I haven't been on the podcast.
Days
3.
Yeah, days since I've been fired, 0.
It just keeps counting up, and he's gonna dread that day when he has to erase it and put 0.
Oh,
which
no.
Which will likely be next week. So
that's how that's gonna be.
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess we could get started on our weekly segments. So I guess care to start us off, Pyro?
All right. So as the catch-up of last week, I'm just going to say I've been playing Persona 5. It's going to be a while since I beat it. I still enjoy it. I'll probably be talking more about it on Reactive Consciousness, but it's just been interesting because I actually took several days, if not a week break, to start playing Final Fantasy XIV again.
Oh,
I don't know why I did it. I think I know why. It's because I was playing Final Fantasy XV like months ago. And when I beat it, I just felt like it wasn't a Final Fantasy that I really enjoyed in terms of everything about it. So I went back to Final Fantasy X, and that was good. I didn't beat that yet, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And then I'm like, you know what? There's a free trial going on for the Final Fantasy XIV. But I couldn't get in because I already had a character that was above level 35 or something. So I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just spend $20 to get it on PS4? And I've been playing that now. And yeah, so
let me get this straight. Like, you thought about getting into Final Fantasy XIV because you were trying to figure out some way to spend the last few days until Persona 5 came out, because you knew you were going to do nothing but play Persona 5 when that game came out. Now Persona 5 is out and you haven't finished it yet, but you're playing Final Fantasy XIV.
More or less.
Okay.
I took a break, and it's been... I don't know why I haven't gone back to Persona 5. It's not because I don't like it. It's just because I know that the next expansion for 14 is coming out, and I actually just beat the original 14 content on Friday, and the annoying part is you have to beat all of the story content in 14, including the patch updates between 14 and the first expansion, before you can even play the first expansion's content. So I have to beat all the story stuff before I can even play the expansions. So I'm just going through that now. I'm about, let's say, a quarter to a third of the way done with that patch content, and then I'll finally be able to play the first expansion, and then I have to beat all of that content before I can play the new expansion. And honestly, one of the reasons why I'm getting back into it is because the Red Mage is coming into the newest expansion, and that's probably one of my favorite Final Fantasy classes ever.
Now, I kind of forgot. Was the Red Mage the one that learned like monster techniques? Or was that Blue Mage?
No, that's Blue Mage. The Red Mage was the one that does a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Maybe it's because I feel like that's what I'm like. I'm not expert at
jack
anything,
of all trades,
but I'm just
master of
really
none.
good at I'm okay at everything, but I'm not really good at anything.
Yeah, there you go. There it is. Not a specialist, jack of all trades.
So that's been how I've been playing games recently. Actually, it's been Persona 5 every now and then, and a lot of Final Fantasy 14. In terms of non-game stuff, I did a couple things. One, I actually took my girlfriend to see Anastasia. It's a new play that's on Broadway, because she really loves the old movie. If you didn't know, it was an animated movie by DreamWorks. It was like a DreamWorks princess movie to kind of counter the Disney princess movies.
Yeah, was that a Don Bluth animated movie?
I think so.
I don't know. So let's say yes.
Okay.
Where's Vice when you need him?
Yeah, no, Don Bluth's the guy who animated like The Secret of Nim.
Yes.
He did the American Tale. He did Twice Upon a Time, which is probably one of his most obscure classics, I think.
He actually Dragon's Lair, the video game.
Oh,
Land Before Time.
Yeah.
From my remembrance of the animation style, yeah, it seems like it's one of those.
It's very fluid.
Yeah, it was a really good play, and it was really interesting because if you've seen the cartoon movie, Rasputin was like the main villain, and there's lots of magic going on, but they actually took it out of the play to make it more realistic, and it was very well done. Also, it was a really cool set because they had not a lot of moving pieces, but the whole back screen was kind of like either projected on or a big video screen, like a big TV that they could project things on. And there was a really cool sequence where they had a train car, let's say, that was more like the skeleton of it so you could see inside, but it was on a rotating platform, and whenever the platform rotated, the video the camera for the video would basically rotate too, so it seemed like the whole scene was rotating.
That's clever.
It's something you had to see to like really be amazed about it, but it was really, really well done. I think I enjoyed, not that I didn't like Anastasia the story, because I do like that, but I think the thing I liked the most about this play was just the set and all the moving pieces that worked together very, very well.
It's really fascinating to see a very well put together play in that regard. Like, it is amazing how, like, what they do to convey scenes, actions, and ideas sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of curious about this removing Rasputin thing, because at least partially, like, the original movie is based on the story of the Bolshevik Revolution, right? That's the backdrop historically of the Anastasia story. Like, it's the same story that was in that had Anastasia be a character in the second Shadow Hearts game. Like, Rasputin is a real life person.
Well, no, I doubt Rasputin was removed so much as him being a sorcerer with a goofy little bat pal.
Well, that's what I mean. Is he still personally in the story? Because I don't know if that brings it closer or further from reality.
So Rasputin wasn't in the play at all, actually. He was replaced with, like, his character was replaced with another character that was supposed to be someone in the military. Okay. Or in, like, the resistance of the kingdom. So, in a way, they changed his character to another character to remove the magic and to remove... Because, honestly, even though Rasputin was someone from history, he was very much an unknown in history. Mm-hmm. Like, no one knew much about him. People say he was immortal. People said he could cast magic. So, I think they tried to make it more in place with the change in regime.
Okay.
And that was the villain in that sense too, is the changing of a regime instead of this guy who knows magic and sorcery. There was no silly sidekick either.
Okay.
So it was, and I think it was cool they did that because people who, honestly, I'm pretty sure a lot of people who went to see it have seen the old movie, but if it's someone who's new, it could be very much seen as a historical piece now instead of what could have been a fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Are the songs still in it?
From my understanding and from what my girlfriend mentioned, all the songs are in it. They changed the orders of some of them, and obviously they changed some of the ones that were sung because either Rasputin sang it or it was about Rasputin.
Yeah, the villain song,
But overall, most of the songs were there.
Okay,
great.
So that's actually one thing I didn't realize. I was wondering if it was just an adaptation of the story of Anastasia or if it was a play of the animated movie.
I think it was kind of a retelling of the story.
Okay.
I guess that's a better way of saying it. And then the other thing that I watched, I believe it was last weekend, was the new Fast and Furious movie, The Fate of the Furious.
You know, one thing about that movie's title, they did do F8 in the hashtag, but it kind of bugs me that the movie's title is FATE, Fate. Like, it would be funnier.
I don't mind it.
It'd be stupider, but also funnier if it were the Fate of the Furious.
But I think in a way, too, they're trying to, not that the movie is not dumb, but I think they're trying to, after Too Fast, Too Furious, I think they're trying to come away from the stupid titles a little bit.
Sure.
And I think it's actually does better with the whole title spelled out because it's one of those things, oh, I get it. It's because it's F8, fate. And because the movie is about their fate. Like, what's going on with this ragtag group of people. They're not really ragtag anymore.
Yeah.
But it was really cool, and honestly, it's over the top like usual. They brought back some old characters, basically. So I think the coolest part about this movie is, you know how more or less the last 3 to 4 movies have been very much, here's the villain of this movie, let's defeat him.
Well, I've only seen the 5th movie, but yes.
So I think the 4th movie, the villain was like some drug lord. The 5th movie, who was the villain of the 5th movie?
Actually,
was that when they were trying to steal
was there even a villain? Because it was definitely a heist. The Rock was
I guess The Rock
the
was
villain,
kind of the villain,
but he wasn't
yeah.
a bad guy. He was just kind of the guy
but it was
chasing
the heist.
them. Yeah.
That was with the giant safe, right?
Yeah, the 5th movie
Okay.
was straight up Ocean's 11, except as an action movie.
And 6, the villain was... Oh, 6 was the villain was the younger brother of... wow, I'm forgetting his name. Who's the guy who kills Han? Anyone else watch the movies?
Not helping, yeah.
Who's the transporter?
Oh, Jason Statham.
Yeah, Jason Statham's character's younger brother is the villain of the 6th movie, and then Jason Statham and some other guys are the villains of the 7th movie. So 8 is really cool because it connects all the movies.
You know, I don't think I've ever seen Jason Statham as a villain.
Yeah, I don't think I have either. But it was, in a way, basically, I'm just saying it was really cool because they kind of connected all the movies.
Sure.
And basically started what apparently is going to be another trilogy.
Okay.
I've never watched an entire Fast and the Furious movie. My wife and I were planning on marathoning the first 7 and maybe watching the 8th one, or maybe watching all 8 of them when they're out on DVD. I've heard.
I think it's one of my favorite action movies.
I've heard The Rock is like hilarious in this one, just in terms of how over the top he is every time he's on screen.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
I think that definitely the Fast and Furious movies as a series is one of my favorite action series of all times.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's cool too because if you watched it from beginning to the end, you realize that they do slowly build up. Not that they planned all this stuff from the beginning, but it is a build, and you can see them growing as a family and growing as a team, and just the predicaments they get themselves in is crazy. So that was basically my week. I don't know if anyone has anything to add about Final Fantasy or the Fast and Furious movies.
I actually am a little bit curious in terms of Final Fantasy XIV. So you mentioned that every time a new expansion comes out, you have to play through every successive part of the storyline, and there's no way to skip ahead. I know that some of the older MMOs, like World of Warcraft, you could just get a character these days that's at level 90 or 80 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the old level cap was, if you want to play the new content, so that you're not infinitely far behind all your friends who are off becoming red mages and bards and samurais while you're stuck grinding against level 1 enemies, at the start of the game. So do they do anything to make it faster to get to the end of the game? It seems kind of tedious.
Yes and no. So I guess I'll give you a short story. The first expansion, Heaven's Ward, they made so all the content of that was locked out if you didn't beat the original content. So the new classes, you couldn't do them until you get to the new area, which you couldn't get to until you beat the story up to that point. Mm-hmm. The story you couldn't continue, and the quest you couldn't start until you get to that area. The only thing that you could do is create a new race that they introduced in the expansion. That was it. In the new one, Stormblood, you can create the new classes without going to that new area. There isn't a new race, but again, the main story obviously you can't go to unless you have that new area. So basically the only things locked out of you now are the quests. So that's okay. In addition, I don't think it's going to come out when the expansion comes out, but soon after they're apparently releasing these 2 potions you can buy. So that's the one annoying thing that, yes, for free, you get a character that's at that level, so you can play that right away. In this, you have to buy a potion that will either, there's 2 potions. One will automatically unlock all the story up to that expansion, so you can, I don't know if you can still beat it, but it will unlock the last quest you need to be able to do that content.
Okay.
Or you can buy a potion that automatically levels you up. So, with that said, you would have to pay both potions to get a character who can even do the new content because their level won't be the right level anyway.
All right.
So I don't know how they're going to do it. That's just what I've found out from research.
I don't feel great about that, but it's basically the cost of buying the new expansion and skipping the entire old one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I guess it's fair.
I mean, I'm hoping in a way that because I don't think they've announced it yet, but I'm hoping they say, like, if you've bought this expansion, we'll give you one of these for free.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the reasons why a couple of reasons why I can see them doing it. One, because they feel, this isn't necessarily definitely the case, but they feel that their story is so good they don't want anyone to skip it. That's probably the one reason. Two is because you really only need one character. So one character, and OldManStompy, you've played 14, so you know that one character can be every single job, and you can switch freely as you wish. So I think because of that, they're not going to give you a free character at a certain level, because I don't know if unless they would say choose which job you want to get to the level, I don't know how they would go about doing that.
Yeah, I guess the only stopping point in that case would be if you wanted to move to a different server and make a new character, like because your friends are playing or have decided to start playing like on a different server. But that was always the bugaboo all the way back to Final Fantasy XI, that it was like notoriously difficult to get on the same server as your friends without buying a pass if you all wound up on, if you didn't coordinate yourselves really well.
Yeah, it's not without its problems, but I will say that out of all the MMOs I played, I've seemed to attach myself to this one the most. I know that I played for 3 months and then stopped for like a year or two, but out of all the ones that I played, I feel like I've liked this one. I've had the most fun playing this one as I'm playing it. Like, going through the missions and the leveling up my jobs and whatever is actually pretty fun, even though it can get kind of repetitive. But WoW, like, I didn't even have fun all the time leveling up and beating dungeons.
I know I have a certain affinity for some of the characters because they're part of my regular team in Final Fantasy Record Keeper. I think Y'shtola and Alphino, respectively, are my best white mage and one of my best DPS black mages between the two of them. And I think that more or less... So my sister-in-law plays 14 a lot with her boyfriend, and I just pop in once in a while because I want to recognize like the characters that I've seen before, and like the Alphino, I have one of his items in Record Keeper. It's like a wind attack, and whenever I see someone use that same attack, I get all excited.
But yeah, so I'll probably keep up talking about this in following weeks. But why don't you tell us what you've been doing, OldManStompy?
What a great segue. So I've got a reference back to you here. So last week on the podcast, I mentioned that I was playing through Trails of Cold Steel, which I felt almost sort of obligated and priced into playing because you bought it for me for a Secret Santa. You know, that
was the point.
Back in January. And it is indeed. You told me it was a 100-hour RPG. If you consider the two Trails games 50-hour games, then yes, I feel like I'm obligated once I finish the first one to go play the second one. And I'm probably going to finish the first one somewhere around the 50-hour mark. My plan for today, before I was asked to be on the podcast this week, was actually to try to finish the game. I'm really close to the end. I was enjoying it a lot. The last few boss fights, like starting from this, the game has 6 chapters plus like an epilogue chapter. The 6th chapter, I guess you could consider to be like the final boss fight of the game, although it's not the hardest boss, or like actually the last boss that you fight. It feels like the climax of the game. The boss of Chapter 5 and the 2 boss fights of Chapter 6 were just long and hard and tedious. The 2 bosses...
Was that because they had like just lots of life, or...?
So, starting from the end of Chapter 5, the boss can use limit breaks like your characters can, and they seem to come with no warning unless I'm missing something, and they hit pretty large areas of effect. And most of them do enough damage to like kill your entire party in one hit.
Jesus.
So I spend a lot of time. So once that happened to me, I just really abruptly lost the Chapter 5 boss fight. I was winning easily. Like, I was really not having difficulty with this fight until all of a sudden she pulls out her limit break and my entire party's dead. And it's like, what was I supposed to do about that? So
yeah, I hate when games give like cheap deaths like that. But anyway.
So those remaining fights, I fought them really conservatively, and I like just loaded all my party members up with healing magic, and I kept my team really far spaced out, which meant that it was also really difficult to apply like attack buffs to all my characters because those are also AoE around the person who's casting them. So the fights took a really long time, and arguably, since it seems like the bosses can't use their limit break more than like once every like 12 to 15 turns. If I had just gone all out aggro after tanking the first one and bring my party back on its feet, I probably could have killed them faster. But as it was, the boss of Chapter 6 took me like an hour to beat, just the fight itself, without taking into account the cutscenes. I was just grinding away at it. You know, I would fight for a while, and then whenever it looked like he had a couple turns in a row, I would space my party out. What gets me is that the game really relies on a turn-based system like Final Fantasy X, for people who have played something a little bit less obscure than the Trail series, where every action has a delay, and that's what determines the turn order. And it feels like there's some bosses... So the bosses that use limit breaks don't really cheat. You know, like a game like Dark Souls, like enemies are powerful, but you can kind of get the sense they're all playing by the same rules as you. They're just bigger and stronger.
Yeah.
Sometimes in games like this, where there's a turn order and everything is based on a delay, it feels like the enemy is cheating a little bit because it feels like their turn is coming up faster than it should.
Yeah.
You know, and even if you're doing things that don't have a high delay, like healing doesn't have a very high delay in Trails, it still feels like the enemy was getting way more turns than me in a couple of early boss fights. And I've heard the actual final boss of the epilogue chapter is kind of like that. And I'm not looking forward to it, but I'll try to tough it out tonight and see if I can do a post-mortem. In general, I think the game was great. I liked a lot about it. Just a couple of the boss fights were huge sticking points, but that was always the case. I mean, I expect a final boss fight to be hard. I really don't want to roll it over. I just don't feel like my preparation is necessarily making the fights easier. It feels like they're hard because the game is stacked against me, which is not a feeling I really have in a lot of games, aside from like Atlas games, like Megaten games. Otherwise, let's see. I mentioned last week that we were going to go to round 1, my wife and I with Mr. Ryu, and I was going to try to start grinding towards 700 AAAs in Dance Dance Revolution. I got to 670, so I only got 3. The highlight of last weekend was Mr. Ryu and my wife and I played 2 rounds of mini golf.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that sounds a lot of fun.
I haven't played mini golf in a while.
Yeah, I hadn't either, and I hadn't really thought about it either. I mean, we spend a lot of time in Manhattan where there really aren't too many mini golf courses, or they're hard to find if there are. So when he told us there was a mini golf course in the Exton Mall where round 1 is located, we were like, okay, sounds great. It's hard to explain what's so fun about mini golf on a podcast. I will say that I've tried to play real golf a few times. I know they have this new kind of driving range called Top Golf, which like video game-izes golf, where they're like targets all over the range that you can try to hit, and it's like cosmic bowling mixed with a driving range.
It's like Yakuza
everything
golf.
has lights, and you can play like target games with everybody else. But I felt really frustrated because for me, all I want to do when I'm learning how to play regular golf is like hit the ball straight and hard, which is like the hardest thing to do. Like making square contact with a real golf club is nearly impossible. And for those of you who like Robin Williams, he has a great bit on golf that's like 5 minutes long. So I urge anybody who enjoys stand-up comedy to go look for Robin Williams' bit on golf. It describes how like pathological you must have been to come up with the game of golf, where like you have this beautiful, Scottish countryside, and all I can think of to do is try to whack a little ball into a tiny little hole, with a club ill-suited for the purpose, for like 5 hours.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah.
Well. So we played mini golf for a while. I remember I used to play a lot when I was a kid, and the course was like 27 holes long, which is pretty long for a mini golf course.
Yeah.
And
for
for $10,
it's usually like 18.
Yeah, usually it's 18, and for $10 we got 2 playthroughs.
Wow.
So we were at it for a long time, and as much as I was enjoying myself, because I do like to play mini golf, I am much older than everybody else, which means that I am automatically better at golf.
And you get tired quicker.
No, I really felt like my wife and Mr. Ryu got bored of the game.
Yeah,
pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So they asked me, since I was a physicist, if I was good at golf, and I told them that's kind of like asking a biologist if they're good at operation.
I used to love playing mini golf. Well, not that I don't anymore. I just, like you, I haven't played it in a while. But mini golf always was fun. But I'd probably be like them, where I'd get bored around hole 12.
It's also one of those games where if one person is good at it, then that ruins it for everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it'd always be funny because when I'd play with my family, I'd do really well on like the first 9.
Yeah.
Like enough to be probably beating them by a decent amount, and then I'd just start getting bored.
Yeah.
And I'd start to go down in the rankings, and that would just make me even more bored because I'm like, now I'm not winning anymore, so why am I trying? And I'd lose at the end of it because.
Yeah. So there was one hole close to the end of the course where there's like a square-shaped barricade that you have to putt the golf ball around to get to the hole, and my wife managed to get it inside the square, but like really close to the hole. And so she took a picture of it, and she's like, "This encapsulates my mini golf experience right now." Yeah, so let's see, what else? So I would be remiss if I didn't mention wrestling at least once every time I'm on this podcast.
Alright, and then you can move on now. So you
Yeah.
mentioned wrestling.
Done.
So anyway, so there's a new wrestler they're trying to build up as like the monster. His name's Braun Strowman. He's really big. He's like 6'8", like legit 6'8",
Wow.
legit like over
crazy.
300 pounds. He's built like a truck. He was, I think he was a strongman. Like, he participated in strongman competitions before he joined WWE. I think I've seen a video of him throwing refrigerators while painted green like the
Jesus.
Hulk,
Jesus Christ.
which
This
is
is one of-
apparently a
this-
stage event. Like, not like actual refrigerators, like kitchen refrigerators, more like mini fridges, somewhere in the middle,
Still.
but still like pretty
yeah.
big.
Well, no, here's a question. I mean, I know everybody in professional wrestling is really strong because that's like a basic job requirement, but
Yeah.
do other professional wrestlers like hear about a guy who was in a strongman competition, like joining the team, and they're just like, oh shit, like I know that the stuff is staged, but the moves still happen, you know? Like, do they get nervous when it's like, oh god, I have to fight this guy?
Well, it is a legitimate danger when guys come up and they're really strong and they're really green, you know, when they're rookies. That
Oh, that's
you
true.
can
They don't know how to,
legitimately
like hold back.
Yeah, well, not like well, you can legitimately hurt somebody, not because you don't know your own strength, just because wrestling is hard, and you
Yeah.
know, like you're trusting someone with your life to do a body slam. You drop a guy on his head, and you know he could get paralyzed. That's happened
Yeah.
more than once in professional wrestling. Not so much about, and I mean, just like the guys. Let's see. I mean, some of the big threats to guys are things like accumulated damage to the spine, you know, or to the neck. Like, that's what really is the killer for a lot of these guys. And that can happen no matter how big you are. I will say that a guy who's pretty close to retirement, Mark Henry, might have legitimately been, like, pound for pound, the strongest man on planet Earth when he moved to wrestling. And we'll never know how accomplished he could have been in the sport of professional weightlifting because he moved to professional wrestling, I think after suffering an injury. He's notorious for being one of the only people alive who can lift what's called the Thomas Inch barbell, which is a single-handed barbell that's something like 175 pounds.
Ugh.
And like just getting your hand around it and getting a good grip on it is already difficult, but lifting it is like nearly impossible for any human being, let alone strongman.
It's crazy.
So anyway, usually the way that so if this name sounds familiar at all, he's the guy who started the James Ellsworth fad. You know, the guy with no chin. James Ellsworth was the guy they fed to him in his first match as a jobber. They just fed these random guys to him to show how strong he was. He would just pick them up, like lift them like a military press, like he was bench pressing them like up above his head, just throw them out of the ring. Like, it was brutal. So they've recently had him rivaling Roman Reigns, who is the current face of the company and not well liked by like internet fans.
Well, yeah, because he took out
who
the
are also the
Undertaker.
same people who tend to buy tickets to events. So, they had a backstage segment where Strowman started beating up Reigns, and then he would leave, and then like the doctors would come out and start attending to Reigns, and then he would come back and start beating him up some more, and then the crowd would cheer for it every time. And this happened like 3, 4, 5 times in a row, and the segment went on for like 20 minutes. Like, he would beat him up, and then he would leave, and then he would come back, and they'd load Reigns onto a gurney, and they'd come back again, and he'd roll the gurney off a cliff, and then beat him up some more. So they came back, and they lifted him back on the gurney, and they put him in an ambulance, and you could hear, like, in the background, like, "Oh, I'm not finished with you yet," and he runs onto the ambulance, just, like, punches him twice, then he walks off again, and he slams the door, and then he lifts the whole ambulance.
Jesus.
And from the bottom, and like tilted on its side, and you could tell they were trying really hard, like I don't think that he can do this naturally.
Okay.
I'm fairly certain that he had a lot of help, that they had somebody pulling the ambulance down from the other side as well, and they were like really carefully cutting with the camera to make it look like he really was that strong.
Okay.
But it was hilarious, and the best part was how happy the crowd was to see him like nearly murder Roman Reigns like 5 times. So the next week he comes back, and he's bored because Roman Reigns is in the hospital, and so he just like picks up a luchador. You know, the lucha libre guys. They tend to be a little smaller, and he just like beats him up, and then he drags him like halfway through backstage and just throws him in the trash.
Jeez.
Wow.
Friggin' bully.
It's pretty nasty. Then he had a match. He had a match with the Big Show. If you know the Big Show, the guy from the Dungeon of Doom.
Yeah, where it's just like ha 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 ha. Like
Yeah.
that's like his whole role in the Dungeon of Doom.
He's like the previous generation's
Brock
last
Lesnar.
big monster.
Yeah.
So he's gonna. So the rumor is, of course, that he's gonna pass the torch to Braun Strowman. So they had a match main eventing Raw on Monday, and they only do the spot like once every 4 or 5 years. But he did a suplex on the Big Show, and when they landed it, like shattered the ring. Like the posts all
Jeez.
fell off, like a Rock'em Sock'em Robots toy. Like everything just fell apart.
It's awesome.
So yeah, that's what I've got to look forward to. So he'll be fighting Roman Reigns at the next big pay-per-view at Backlash. So the next time I'm on the podcast, I'll probably recap that match. The last thing I've got is this week I did a sort of a trip down memory lane, because my wife and I might be moving into a new renting a lower floor of a house soon. We might be having a big move, and so I went through my old basement. I have a lot of my stuff packed up in my parents' old basement. And so I know you guys have probably seen this picture on Facebook, but I have a collection of like nearly 600 Beanie Babies.
Were those just yours or collected from your family?
Those are entirely mine. That does not even include
Jesus.
the ones... Because my mom has a pretty big collection too, and it is not included in that picture.
My brother used to collect them, and then I saw that picture, and I'm like, wow, he had nothing on you.
I have basically...
Same with me. My brother and I both collected them, but like
Right.
we had a bunch, not like hundreds.
So what partially drove the Beanie Baby craze, aside from like the generic, the craze of it being a big fad, was that they would periodically retire some of the styles.
Yep.
And so I sort of got in when that really hit its fever pitch. Like it was around the summer of 1997. And I have basically everything released after that point, or available at that point, up to around 2001. So like 4 or 5 years worth of Beanie Babies. And I remember thinking that the ones I really liked, I would scour stores. I lived in Florida that first year I started collecting, and I would scour like every store in the area for Beanie Babies, and I really wanted the ones that were retired right before I started collecting. They were like my white whale of collecting. But since stores tended to be wiped clean of Beanie Babies by all the collectors, it was impossible to find, and I thought I would never see them. They're also very hard to buy on eBay, because it's very hard to... like most people don't bother to have their Beanie Babies like authorized, by like a company, the Beanie Baby equivalent of Beckett's, or So even now, Beanie Babies are really hard to sell. If you're familiar with the BuzzFeed article, it says if you own these 10 Beanie Babies, you can retire. Like, that's a scam. People just put Beanie Babies up on eBay for like tens of thousands of dollars, because they only have to get hit once. They only have to get one stupid rich person who wants to spend $10,000 on a Princess Diana Beanie Baby, not knowing how much it's worth, to be set for months.
I used to have the Princess Diana Beanie Baby.
Yeah, it's not really worth anything. Like, it's worth a little bit just because it's interesting. That's something they made a Princess Diana memorial Beanie Baby when she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lot of these are obviously worth more than you paid for them, but not like...
Yeah.
Well, that's
the
the thing,
majority
like,
of them. The majority of them are not worth as much as I paid for them, even now, accounting for inflation. And they're hard to sell. Just because not that many people want them, and there are so many scammers. So we've been trying to give them away. I knew a couple of years ago that the fad was completely dead, because I made this whole big deal about how the Beanie Babies from early 97 and 96 were like my white whales, and I just went to our ShopRite in like 2016, the ShopRite close to where we live, and they were just sitting 1996 Beanie Babies on the shelf. They must have just found them in a warehouse somewhere, and they had them on clearance.
That's
so I was like, I don't even want this anymore. Like, this was interesting like 15 years ago, but now I feel like my life has been purposeless.
Jeez. No, I remember, I think my brother had gotten some book that, not a price guide, but just a guide on the Beanie Babies themselves from back in the day. We both sold ours when they were sellable. Like, we went to some like trade show where you could buy them, and we sold a bunch of ours. I mean, we didn't like make millions of dollars or anything that day, but that was kind of it for us. This was a while back.
Yeah, I think I have a copy of that book.
Really?
Or a
Nice.
similar one. There was a cottage industry, supporting Beanie Babies around the time they were popular.
Mm-hmm.
I was reminded that I have a full set of the original Power Rangers toys, Like I have the Megazord, the
Yeah, it's
Dragon
rocking.
Zord. I don't have Titanus because I thought it was stupid. Like, why would I buy a toy that I just put my other toys into? That was really all Titanus did. Like the little guns on the sides barely moved, just like in the series.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of those things where I would see, like, I had the Sega Genesis Power Rangers fighting game, and I remember seeing the Ultra Zord. I was like, oh man, they're breaking out, like, I don't even know if I knew it was called Titanus at the time, but, like, I think I might have seen that thing at all in the show, like, once. Like, I didn't watch every episode or anything like that, but, like, I almost never saw it. I'm like, when did they use it? It's just like, that's just what it was. It was just like a big accessory.
Well, yeah, it was like, so, I mean, it was the Megazord, and then the Mega Dragon Zord, and then if they combined it with Titanus, I think it was the Ultra Zord.
It was the Ultra Zord.
That was like their level 3 super, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, so that was my whole week. I was playing a lot of Trails, playing some DDR, and selling stuff out of my garage, or trying to. So, Lotus, why don't you go ahead and tell us how much further you are than me?
Regale us of your stories of Isaac.
Yeah, you beat my ass in Isaac Rebirth, but with Afterbirth, I'm slowly hacking away. So I did make a little bit of progress in terms of getting closer to that extremely difficult to get 100% achievement for Isaac. I had mentioned before that there were 3 achievements that were in the regular main game. One of them was just get a 3-win streak. Another was get a 5-win streak, each with different character. And the third was beat the Dark Room, like the negative level 10, without having picked up any coins, hearts, or bombs. And I was able to knock out all 3. I did the don't pick up anything one with the Lost because he just can't pick up red hearts. So I just had to tiptoe around blue, black, and white hearts and like hope to God that when I cleared a room, like a bomb didn't spawn in front of my exit door or something, because that's really like, that's not cool. But once I was finally able to do that, I actually died as the Lost. I wasn't able to quite beat that run with it, but I had picked up a power-up that lets me respawn as Judas, so that technically counted as a Judas victory, but whatever, I got the damn achievement. And after that, I beat it with Cain, because he, and at this point I was able to pick up whatever power-ups I wanted, but I beat it with Cain, because he has a high luck stat and starts with a key. Then I beat it with Isaac, who has a bomb and a power-up that alters other power-ups that you could pick up. If you don't like the one you see, maybe you'll get a better one when you use the item. Then I did it with Azazel, who's super overpowered at the beginning of the game, but he only has 3 black hearts for health, so I had to hope to God I found actual health upgrades, which I did. And finally, I beat it with Samson, who the more he gets hurt, the more powerful his shots become. What's nice about just simply beating 5 runs is that you don't have to do the level 10 dark room or chest. If you because to get to the chest, for example, when you beat Mom, you pick up a white photograph and then you ascend to the heaven level, the cathedral, and then the chest. Or if you pick up the black photograph, you can descend to Sheol and then to the dark room. But if you pick up, say, the white photograph and you descend, or if you pick up the black photograph and you ascend, or if you simply don't take a photograph, then the run ends early at whichever level 9 you go to. And normally you don't want that in terms of, clearing X level with X character for those achievements, but I already had those. So I basically just got to cut my run slightly short.
That's nice.
Yeah, so I was able to knock out those achievements surprisingly easy after I'd gotten that first one. Then, I keep saying it's greed and greedier, and it sucks. But I have been able to beat regular greed, not greedier, but regular greed with Apollyon, and I beat greedier with Judas, Eden. Thank God, you have to pay each time you play as Eden. You get like a little Eden.
Oh wow!
You get Eden tokens when you clear a run. You don't pay real money, but you have a limited number of attempts with him before you have to play through like the regular game again. But I mean, I haven't done that in a while. I've been doing so many attempts at runs that I've just been accumulating coins. So I had like 76 Eden attempts. And when
that's okay.
Yeah. And when I finally cleared greed mode with him, remembering that simple restarts count as using up an Eden token, I was down to like something like 30 or like 25 or 30 coins. I used up a lot. Because because I just wanted to have like a good starting run, but I finally did it. The first Eden attempt, I actually did the same thing where I died and came back as Judas, I think. So that counted as a Judas win. And I was like, God damn it, I finally have a good Eden run, and I couldn't do it with Eden, but then I did later. And I beat it with Eve, who I was really scared of doing a run with because I do not like playing as Eve. So now I have 9 achievements left before I platinum the game. And 2 of those achievements are platinuming Rebirth and platinuming Afterbirth. So I really have 7 achievements to actually strive for. So what I have to do is beat Greedier mode with the blue baby. That's going to suck. With Lazarus, with Lilith, with the Lost. That's going to suck. And with Apollyon. And I have not gotten the achievements for beating everything with Apollyon. So when I beat Greedier mode with him, I'll get that too. So that counts as 2 achievements in 1. And then after that, all I have to do is beat Ultra Hard mode, which I'd mentioned before. What I did not mention about Ultra Hard mode is that I had said that there were 4 curses. Labyrinth, which puts 2 floors in 1, 2 bosses in a row, but 2 item rooms. You have the Maze, which randomly shuffles you when you leave a room, sometimes, into like a different room. There's Blindness, you can't tell what item you're picking up, ever. And, I guess there's one more. Oh, and there's the Lost, where you can't read the map. What I did not know is that there are some items you can use to counteract these curses. They just don't work on Ultra Hard, on the challenge. So you get nothing. And sometimes you might fall under the Curse of the Unknown, where you can't read your health, or the Curse of Darkness, where it's just dark. Those curses you can dispel, but those are like the least imposing curses, so it's like whatever. What I also did not know is that anytime, like, sometimes enemies have variations where they're bigger and they're a different color, so they have like more health and do more damage. Anytime an enemy could be one of those, it will be, just every single time. So that's also really frustrating. There is an item, the 10-sided die, the D10, where it re-rolls enemies. If you use that, then you can change them to whatever the hell. But, good luck finding that one particular item. In addition, you can just... If you find like a health upgrade or an item that grants you an immediate blue heart or something on its use, that will work, but heart pickups just don't exist, so don't get hit, ever. And like even some items that drop pick-upable, like item pickups, like red or blue hearts, if there's a tarot card called the Lovers, when you use it, it drops 2 red hearts. Just nothing happens when you use it. Like, no cheating. Like, you must pick up, like, a Book of Revelations, which gives you a blue heart upon use, or something like that. Or, again, if you find a health upgrade, that's one thing. But health drops just don't happen, ever. Including bombable rocks that sometimes drop blue hearts. I've bombed those rocks before, and they'll produce nothing. Like, sometimes they have bombs and keys, they'll give me those, but if it would have been health, then just nothing happens when I blow them up, and it sucks. So this run is actually more brutal than I thought it was. And not only that, but it goes to Mega Satan. So you have to go all the way through the basements, the caves, the depths, the womb, and only the negative photo picks up. So you can't go to the cathedral and then the chest and get those 4 items at the end. You must go down to Sheol and into the dark room and get 4 red chests, which usually suck, and then fight Mega Satan. And by the way, no cheating. If you don't pick up the dark photograph and you just try killing the run on Sheol, the run will end, but you won't get the achievement for having beaten it. So no cheating. You gotta beat Mega Satan. So I am so not looking forward to this. I basically just have to keep restarting over and over until I just get a combination of items I like. For example, if I get Pyromaniac, or a Pyromaniac heals you if you're hit with an explosion, or if I get Charm of the Vampire, which kills me as I kill, or heals me as I kill enemies, or if I get an item that regenerates, that works. But again, picking up hearts, there are no hearts to pick up in an entire Isaac run. So have fun, especially starting at level 7, like the womb, where enemies do a full heart of damage instead of half. So it's just like, oh god. So that's going to be probably the most difficult thing I do in the game. And I am not looking forward to beating Ultra Greedier with the Lost, because that guy is just Explosion City. Like, it's so hard to avoid getting hit by him. So that's my Isaac thing. I'm getting there. Otherwise, the other things I'm going to mention are going to be more brief. I actually very recently downloaded the GoldenEye Source Mod, like using Half-Life 2 Source Engine, I think, and I gave it a shot. So you can actually play multiplayer GoldenEye, like online on servers with modern first-person controls, and it's really refreshing how faithfully they captured and recreated the levels from the Nintendo 64 game, and completely redid the soundtrack and everything. It's just a lot of fun to play. I mean, I get the crap kicked out of me almost every time I play because other people are actually good at multiplayer games, but it's still really entertaining to actually be able to do. Like, on principle, it's a really cool game, just because, no longer do you have to cut your TV screen into quarters and play a game with, I can still play it, but very, very dated controls that do not age well. Like, hold R and press C down to duck. Like, are you kidding me? Like, hold R and move the stick to aim. Like, there's no moving while aiming. Like, it's a whole different world than from what, like, modern controls are, where you move with the keyboard and aim with the mouse, and you can move and aim in free time, in real time and everything. I'm sorry, Pyro.
Is there, do they keep the HUD? Do they bring, like, the HUD back, the old GoldenEye, or is it still, like, the source HUD for
You mean
the
like,
life and
you mean like
ammo?
your watch with the health and ammo?
Yeah.
You could press tab to look that up, but it looks like the old one, except that you don't lose frames when you get hit anymore. That's kind of nice too.
And is there something lost in not crappy polygon models?
I mean,
like,
if you really want that kind of thing,
that's something that was really enjoyable about GoldenEye, was how shitty the models looked.
Yeah, the models don't look fantastic, but like, yeah, they're not like Tomb Raider 1 Lara Croft or anything like that. So yeah, they definitely look more like things that you might see in like a basic Half-Life model, which is pretty cool because you could play as various characters. You could play as just like the 64 game, generic Russian soldier, generic scientist. But you could play as Bonds, Trevelyan, Baron Samedi. But they bring in some characters you wouldn't expect, like Mayday from View to a Kill, or there was someone else.
So I remember the famous one was Oddjob was in GoldenEye, and it was
Oddjob is still there. I don't think he has his hat though. I think it's more just like, okay, look, you could play as Oddjob without the complete bullshit. I think they still have the height like Oddjob and Jaws, but I think you got to play the game for real. One mode that I've really enjoyed is called Arsenal mode, where you start off with some weapon, and when you kill 2 people with it, then you are automatically upgraded to the next weapon. Like, you have infinite ammo, but you can run out of a clip and you gotta reload. But you will never have to find ammo boxes, but you are you are restricted to that weapon until you kill 2 people with it. Then you're upgraded to the next weapon, and whoever kills someone with weapon number 10 wins. It's really entertaining. But if you kill yourself, blow yourself up, or fall off a pit, or if you are slapped to death, then you lose a level. Also, if you kill somebody with a slap, then you get armor. Otherwise, I haven't been able to find armor. This is just one particular mode. There's still the regular free-for-all mode, like in the old N64 game, but I thought this was a new and interesting change. Although, it does get frustrating when I get killed immediately after spawning. Like, I just started the round, and I died like 3 times, and everybody else is on, like, weapon number 3. It's like, god damn, how are you guys this good? But otherwise, it's really fun to play, though. Pretty entertaining. I mentioned Rule of Rose on previous podcasts. I have finished recording it. I just have to edit it now. I have edited 4 installments, 13 to go. At this point, I'm about to get some final drafts turned in on Tuesday and Wednesday. That's going to hit me pretty hard, but once I move all that stuff out of the way, I think I'm going to have more time to actually get this stuff done, because it has been kind of inexcusably long since I've uploaded a proper Let's Play. Like, I've been putting stuff on my channel the whole time, but like a proper Let's Play, oh boy, like it's been way the hell too long. Like, the last thing I did was House of the Dead 4, so it's like I gotta really get back on the wagon here. And I guess the last thing I'll mention is I was over at Mr. Ryu's place today, and you may have known this, but the new season of Mystery Science Theater is up on Netflix.
Yeah, I've been meaning to try to start watching that, but I haven't gotten a chance to yet.
Yeah, we picked we actually watched 2 episodes because there was Wizards of the Lost Kingdom, and that actually had a sequel, so we watched that too, and it's with a completely different cast. It's a sequel in name only, like Troll 2 has nothing to do with Troll, but whatever. So we watched those, and it was pretty fun. It was like bad 80s swords and sorcery, so we got our enjoyment out of those. It's interesting because, you know, the cast on Mystery Science Theater has been replaced, but they're still following the beats of the old show, right down to the new guy, I think his name is Jonas, the new guy having a sort of more like a low-key personality, kind of like Joel, as opposed to Mike. And they even still do the invention exchange with Felicia Day, who is playing Pearl's granddaughter. But and I think Patton Oswalt might be like a descendant of Frank from Dr. Forrester's goon. But they're still doing invention exchange like the old MSG3K episode. So it's kind of refreshing to see that brought back. And they still have a million doors to go through to get to the movie. But they're done differently. Like the doors open differently from the ones we knew, and they're done in stop motion. So it's still like, that's one thing I really appreciate, is they're still working with a lot of models and like prop looking props. So it's like a new old show. It's like a new take on an old thing, which I thought was really entertaining. So it's kind of cool how much they are like showing respect for the old show from freaking like 1988. So it's cool to see that stuff like brought back, but it's not all CG now or anything. Like they're still trying to keep it authentic, which I very much appreciate. It's just weird to see Mystery Science Theater in like widescreen HD, but you know, overall from what we saw, it's an enjoyable show.
Nice.
So that's been my week. So I guess normally at this point in the podcast we would do Vice's weigh-in. So I guess I'll take over for that. Now I don't know what Vice's actual situation is, but I can promise you he definitely gained, maintained, or lost weight. I can promise you that. So I'm glad we got that covered. So at this point, I think we have time for a question. This one is from Insane Buffoon. Would you rather go 1 year without television and no cheating, that means no Netflix and other streaming services, or just 3 months without an internet connection?
So I think the timeline of this, or the time involved, is what really makes it interesting, because I'll be honest, I don't watch a lot of TV. Like, really the only TV I watch is stuff that I'm watching with the people who I live in my house with when we're like eating or whatever. And when I'm bored, I might watch TV, but obviously I could just play games. So I think I would rather go the year without TV, but at the same time, that's a year without TV. I can't judge my yearly usage of TV, but I do know that 3 months without internet connection would be like slowly killing me.
I would agree with Pyro. In fact, when I moved into my previous apartment in the Chicago area, I was there from March to January, and we never bothered to get cable. We never hooked up a television to a TV jack. We did occasionally watch things on Netflix, so that by itself would violate the spirit of the question. But I have a much easier time thinking of myself as going a year without television. The question then would be, like, how much would you have to take away before I actually get to the point? Like, are you not allowed to watch a YouTube video? Are you not allowed to listen to the radio? Like, are you not allowed to consume media of any kind? Like, I think I could do it, and I'd kind of be up for the challenge. But both of them, once you hit the point where I actually, because I do like to listen to things to fall asleep a lot of the time, just to have some background noise, not even that I pay that much attention to, like Lotus Prince videos. Cough.
Oh.
Once you found like the media drought that would actually start to get to me, then yeah, I might go crazy before 3 months is up.
Mm-hmm. In my case, I would definitely rather go a year without TV, because I can always pick it up later. Like this is, I'm someone who already has to wait a year for every Game of Thrones season because I have to wait for it to get on DVD, because while I have Netflix DVD mailing servers, I do not have the streaming option. So I'm already waiting a year for Game of Thrones. For stuff that I'm actually watching now, like Samurai Jack or like Keeping Up with Attack on Titan and One Piece, that stuff, like, they're on streaming services. I'll be able to pick them up after I get back, and I'll actually be able to binge them. Whereas with the internet, there's like I'm more of an internet person than a TV person, as you guys mentioned. But also, there's just the basic concept of, like, needing work emails or even casual emails. Like, I gotta have those. You know, like, part of my job involves going online and telling the students, hey guys, this is going to be due on Friday or whatever day. Like, I really need to do my job.
I kind of feel like with questions with it like this, you can ignore things that you're
be more in the
to
spirit
do.
of what you'd rather do. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, even in that spirit, I would still prefer to lose the TV because I don't watch that much TV, and in terms of internet, I'm way more addicted to something like Facebook than I am, you know, casually watching TV. Now, I mean, yeah, I would still use the TV as a monitor for video games, but that's not watching TV. Mm-hmm. So I would, definitely still prefer to keep my internet. I could always pick up what I missed on TV later via TV or even on the internet. So that's definitely the option I would go with. So
yeah, I guess I forgot that I also lived in Europe for several years, and I never got a TV subscription because I wouldn't understand most of what was on TV anyway.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. This one is from Fakafon. What do you think about modern conventions for video games? For example, cover shooting mechanics, or pressing a button to run. Games like Quake, Unreal, or Killing Floor never had those because you were always at top speed. Nowadays, games make you sprint by pressing a button, usually resulting in you not being able to shoot. Killing Floor 2 has the mechanic, which is baffling because Killing Floor 1 had the opposite. You pressed a button to walk, which would allow you to walk on ledges without falling. So, yeah, running on Killing Floor 2 is frankly baffling. It just created a new kind of problem that was never present before and doesn't add anything. That's my opinion. Yeah, the game I remember pressing a button to walk would be like the original Deus Ex, I think. But yeah, modern conventions definitely have changed things. So what do you think about modern conventions for video games? That can be broad, or you can talk about specific ones you'd like, I guess.
So I will say this comes up a lot when I'm shopping for games on Steam, and that like I'll look at a game and I'll think, hey, this looks really good, and then I'll see in the tags roguelike, because now like 90% of new like indie looking sprite based games are procedurally generated. I guess because
and,
it's
like,
a really easy way to make a game longer, longer than it seems like it is. You know, by just uploading the assets and some procedural content generation, and then you have a roguelike, and you just slap that label on, and it kind of makes me not want to play the game as much because I feel like the levels won't... It really limits the level design. Like, it's hard to see, like, the loving crafting of a level, you know, and the challenge that the
No, that is true.
Wants you to, you know.
I've seen that even in something like, as far back on the PS2 as, like, Dark Cloud or whatever. Procedural generation is really cool because you never know what you're going to encounter when you enter a dungeon, but at the same time, you're going to enter a room and be like, oh, I've been in this type of room before. You know, like, I definitely remember this like, The Binding of Isaac's done that a few times. Oh, this is the room where the rocks are arranged in such a pattern. Like it's a different run, but you start to recognize certain enemy layouts or room types or whatever.
Right. So The Binding of Isaac gets around it by having so many different factors and axes by which, you know, a run can evolve. You know, you can become so powerful, and there's so many different ways to become powerful. Yeah. So many different kinds of enemies that every run plays out differently, and there's just a ridiculous amount of assets in there, and that's the part of the game that they fine-tune. You know, it's hard to fine-tune a game with procedural generation. You never want your players to be stuck in a situation where they can't proceed because you didn't anticipate the way that your dungeon could be generated. But that's something that you legitimately have to worry about. And even in Binding of Isaac, it used to happen all the time. Like, it used to be possible to spawn in a secret room that had no exit. Like, to warp to a secret room that had no exit. Because of some minor quirk of the procedural generation engine.
You'd have to blow your way out, and if you couldn't, then it's too bad.
Yeah, I think, overall, I like most modern conventions. The one thing that I'm glad kind of went away is QTEs. I hated quick time events, like, with a passion. So I'm glad that those are kind of falling by the wayside. But I think I kind of agree with OldManStompy in the sense when a mechanic is overdone, it kind of makes me not want to play it because I can play so many other games with that mechanic. Why am I playing this one game? But I think overall most modern mechanics are added because they're an improvement that most people have found. Like cover mechanics is a modern mechanic now, and I don't know if Gears of War was the first one to do it, but they definitely
they're known for it.
They're known for it, and they did it very well. And it was a cool new mechanic that I think really improved most third-person shooters. So that's why I'm perfectly okay with it staying in most games from now on. Whereas buttons to run or walk, I kind of feel like the button to walk is better because I'm running most of the time.
Yeah.
Other than if it's a sneaking game. And then like other mechanics that I kind of enjoy because they add fun to the game. So a lot of people complain about a lot of health systems now in first-person shooters or even some third-person shooters where there's no health bar anymore. It's just, hey, the screen's getting bloodier and bloodier, and once it's too bloody, you're dead, and it regenerates over time. And I think while it's less realistic, it makes the game more fun. And because one of the big things that I think a lot of game developers have to deal with is trying to have as little downtime as possible. And I know that there's this tension that you'd have from having low health and trying to find a health pack, but the player then dying and had to restart the level, I think they figured that is more of a problem than letting them just wait a little bit and get right back into the action.
And actually, speaking of that mechanic, I suspect, I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect that another reason that's kind of gone by the wayside is that I think, like, the concept of finding health pickups or else too bad, you have to go back to your checkpoint, that just comes off to me. Like, I know you can do it on consoles, but I just picture that as more of a PC thing, where you can just press escape and then save your game whenever you want. Like, other games do have checkpoints and health pickups and everything, but with something like classic Doom, you could save whenever you wanted. And in games where it's really more checkpoint based or something to that extent, I feel that you get to, like you said, you get to continue playing the game longer if you just duck away when, like Uncharted, like it gets bloodier or the screen gets gray or whatever. As far as my take on this, though, regarding cover-based shooting, I'm a little ambivalent about this one. On one hand, I generally like the mechanic, but I don't know how much I care for seeing it all the time, especially because, on one hand, just running around and hoping things don't hit you is a stressful experience, but with cover-based shooting, I find that a lot of it turns to, like, the game turns into whack-a-mole, where you and the enemies are both covering, and you're like, when are they going to raise their head to shoot at me? Aha! And you quickly poke them. And I know this is a very exaggerated example because it's a particularly, like, crappy game, but Ride to Hell Retribution really took that to the extreme, where it's like you are just waiting for dudes to pop up, and then you just pick them off one by one. OldManStompy.
So sort of a thought on that is a lot of games, they transition you from an environment where the cover is indestructible to an environment where the cover is finite, and as the firefight continues, the cover gets blown away, and you have to sort of engage in active combat.
That I feel is better.
And the transition between that, like when you have indestructible cover, it really does encourage you to approach a scenario really conservatively and to play the whack-a-mole, like you said. But then, if you haven't really been training yourself to do sort of active combat, then once the cover is no longer permanently available to you, then it can become really stressful. Like, balancing that is really hard to do.
Yeah, no, I could definitely get behind that. I'm just not, like, I don't play too terribly many cover-based shooter games, so I might be a bad barometer for this one, but I'm accustomed to cover being indestructible, so I'm just invincible until an enemy decides to actually walk out and get behind me or something, and just, like, the mechanic can work, especially as you just described, but when it doesn't, like, it's really weird. You're in this battle-torn, town where everyone's dead, but, like, each side is just very quietly waiting for the other to show itself, and it's this weird situation. It's almost like what I've heard about games like Amnesia, for example, where being unable to fight back is terrifying because you have this invincible monster chasing you. but then I've heard people who get used to the gameplay describe it as horror-themed hide-and-seek, because it's like, oh, the enemy's here, that means I better go to my hiding spot, and he's gone. Good, go back out. Like, you know, it's one of those things where when you get too used to the mechanics, it could almost backfire for you. I will say, from what I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, so one other thought that came to mind was that in cover-based shooters, so aside from the bloodying mechanic that indicates like your health, a lot of those games also use the flash of the screen on a certain direction to indicate where you've gotten hit from.
Yes.
Which doesn't really jive well with the fact the screen is also getting bloodier, which makes it harder to tell where you're getting hit from. It's also a 2D display of where you're getting hit from in a 3D world. So when I play cover-based shooters, I actually get really anxious, because when I'm getting hit, especially when the game is a little bit on the harder side, or when I'm later on in the game, a lot of the time then the enemies are positioned in places where they can hit you, even if you're in cover, if you don't move a lot. So like it feels like there's no safe spot, and I don't know what to do with myself a lot of the time.
Yeah, that is pretty scary when you go out into, like, it almost reminds me of Arkham City, where there's that one segment where you're supposed to swing and glide through that section where there's just snipers that one-shot you in various towers, and you just feel so uncomfortable if you're not doing it just right, because you're just like, oh my god, like, I'm just in the middle of this sea of insta-kill guns. Like, so in a cover-based shooter where, like, the enemy can see you, it's a pretty terrifying experience. I will say one thing Fakafan mentioned for a button to run. I don't really mind that, especially because I'm accustomed to playing at least console-based games with a PlayStation controller, so I'm used to holding probably circle to run, and then the trigger aims or whatever. So that's not so bad for me. I mean, you can't usually run and shoot, but you could often move and shoot. Running I don't tend to mind, but then again, part of it is ironically deviating from answering this question. I'm used to playing older games. So like Resident Evil, you would press a button to run and you would just have to freeze whenever you wanted to shoot something. So I'm used to that to the point where it doesn't much bother me. Like, I remember Vice was saying when he was playing Dead Rising, oh god, I'm so not used to having to stop and aim and shoot, and I can't move while aiming. And like, I wouldn't have even noticed that. Like, I'm just used to those really ancient... I'm just used to those ancient mechanics. Or, like, again, bringing up Ride to Hell. When I was playing that with Mr. Ryu, I noticed that I could strafe while aiming and shooting. And I was like, whoa, cool! And he's like... And Mr. Ryu's like, are you freaking kidding me? But, like, no, yeah, for real. Ride to Hell has Dead Rising beat in that regard. It even has Yakuza Dead Souls beat in that regard, in terms of being able to aim while moving. And it's like... that's still new-ish, like, it's to the point where it's novel to me, so I'm not even bitter if that function isn't there. I don't even expect it to be there, so I can't speak too terribly much about certain new game mechanics. Yes, OldManStompy.
So one old game mechanic that I think most of us will probably agree we're happy is no longer in games, or has been slowly dying over the course of the last several years, is random battles in RPGs.
Yeah. Especially, actually, that's funny. I was thinking about that when I was playing Persona 5, because Persona 5, they have an interesting way of doing non-random battles, and it made me think, wow, I'm glad that they're not here, because just before that I was playing 10, and the encounter rate was higher than I remembered some of those games being, and I'm like, I really don't like that I take 5 steps and I have to fight another battle.
Yeah, there are some really classic RPGs like Skies of Arcadia.
I was going to mention that, yeah.
That are notorious for being like basically flawless, except for the encounter rate being like the one thing that everybody talks about as being something they hate about the game.
Yeah, and for Skies of Arcadia, I mean, I played the GameCube version, and that encounter rate is crazy high. And then Vice the Bold told me that was taken down from the Dreamcast version, and I can't even imagine what that means, because sometimes you really do only like Pyro said, go a few steps before getting into another fight. Like, how is this lower than anything? like how is the Dreamcast version playable at that point? So yeah, random encounters, especially speaking of Final Fantasy X, I remember a friend of ours, a different Dan, had been playing Final Fantasy X, and he'd been just grinding for like an hour, and he finished grinding, and he's like, okay, now I'm going to go back to my save point, because I need to save, and random encounter, King Malboro, bad breath, dead. And it's
Dead.
like, God damn it.
This happened to me in Final Fantasy VII. There's a part where you are playing as Cloud right after a cutscene, and you have to walk like literally like 2 steps in the next area before Barrett and Aeris, or Barrett and Tifa, like rejoin your party. And in those like 2 steps, I got into a random encounter with 2 enemies and I died.
Oh, that sucks. Actually, one thing I should mention, what do you guys think of automatic save points, like automatic checkpoints, auto-saving versus save points?
I mean, I've played long enough. I like Tales of Eternia's system, where you can save wherever you want, but you can only load back at predetermined areas.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a clever idea.
I don't mind either one. It just is tough for me when I switch between games that have different ways. So
yeah,
like I'll be playing an RPG where I have to save all the time to make sure that I save in time, especially like a Mega 10 game where death is inevitable, or Dark Souls where death is inevitable, but
or life where death
where death is inevitable. But then I play, let's say, an FPS where they have, let's say, those checkpoints and they have autosaves, or even if it's like the Baldur's Gate type games where a lot of them now have autosave. So I'll go and I'll play it and I'll die and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go back to that autosave. But then I go play a Persona game and I forget to save and I die and I'm like,
yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think I prefer manual saves, but you gotta remember to manually save, or else you're gonna have a really bad time. The thing I don't
You're
care
gonna have
for,
a bad time.
Yeah, the thing I don't care for about autosaves is that usually a game will keep like 5 or 6 autosaves and then start overwriting those. And normally that really shouldn't matter in terms of just basic gameplay. But as a Let's Player, that has interfered with me once in a pretty bad way before. Because one time I was doing an installment and like the video file just didn't work or got corrupted or whatever. And I was like, oh damn, I gotta redo that part. And like I hadn't, like maybe like 10 minutes of gameplay were just lost because it had autosave past that point. Like I did have a bunch of autosaves to go back to, but not far enough. And I was like, oh no. So like I'm not a fan of, I don't know, I guess I don't mind autosaving as a concept, but automatically eliminating even older autosaves, I mean, it's a tough call because you don't want to just kill your storage memory with autosaves, but on the other hand, I don't like losing a file without my permission.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where even with autosaves, you have to remember to save every now and then if you want separate files.
I do that. I do that constantly. Whenever I Let's Play, like I make 2 save files just in case something screws up on one of them. And even with the last thing I did, Rule of Rose, like that has paid off more than once. I'm sad to say that I've had to even have that issue come up more than once, but it has. So is there any other game mechanic which we should bring up, or has that, I don't know, kind of run the gamut there?
Well, I thought it was a good question.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that.
I'll probably be thinking about it tomorrow too. Too bad the podcast will be over.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting playing something on, you know, a modern PC or PS4 or Xbox One game, and then going back to like PS1 or PS2 and seeing how things differed. Even like Yakuza, go back to 1 and 2 sometime. Like, they're fixed camera angles. It's such a weird concept to me now that I'm playing my 4th game in a row in the series that does not do that. It's just an interesting thing.
I know I'm going to run into this because I'm about to finish Trails of Cold Steel, and then I'm probably going to go back and try to play Trails of the Sky second chapter. And Cold Steel is just a much more polished game, even though they're both very good. So going back will be pretty hard. And that's only a few years difference. It's still like in the modern gaming era.
Yeah, actually, that's actually one reason that I like to play games in chronological order of their series. For example, the Souls games. You can watch the mechanics slightly improve with each game. Like Dark Souls has a proper run and jump button. The magic meters the concept of magic has been completely redone. Things are smoother. There's no more hub world. There's an open world. Like, it's interesting to see how each game just tweaks a little bit from the previous game. Same goes for, like, again with Yakuza. Even entering battle screens is way more fluid in 5 than even 4. Like, when I first saw 3 and 4, where a guy stops you on the screen, and then all the pedestrians run out of the way, and now you're in the battle screen. That blew my mind. Instead of like loading a battle from when a guy runs into you, like that concept was crazy when I first saw that on the PS3. So it's really cool to see how games tweak themselves with each iteration of the series. You could watch the mechanics and the technology change. Sometimes, well, most of the time for the better.
Unfortunately, since if you've been following Vice's story about Falcom, in the case of the Kiseki games, you basically have to play them as they come, because it's a minor miracle each individual Trails game comes out in America at all.
Yeah. There are some unfortunate, like, unavoidable scenarios. Also, there are little weird quirks, like with the Resident Evil series. Resident Evil 3 came out in America before Code Veronica did.
Right.
But, no, actually, I think it might have been... No, you know what it was? I think it was the case in both Japan and America. I think Resident Evil 3 came out first because, PS1 versus Dreamcast. But at the same time, Code Veronica, I think, was being designed first because it was going to be Resident Evil 3. So when you play Resident Evil 3, you'll notice that you no longer walk up to stairs and press the confirm button to automatically walk up them. In Resident Evil 3, you can just naturally walk up and down stairs like in a Souls game. But in Code Veronica, that mechanic reverts, and it was so bizarre to me. I'm like, isn't this a newer game? Like, it's just like a weird little... Like, this game came out before the other one, but when did they start working on this one as opposed to the other one? It's a weird little thing you might be able to notice.
It sounds like the history of Resident Evil would make a great recon topic for a future podcast.
That would. I gotta freaking sometime in my lifetime play 6 and 7.
Well,
but, yeah.
When you do, you can talk
when
about
I
it on
do.
Corrective Consciousness.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, definitely spent a lot of time on this question, but had a lot of time talking about it.
Yeah, thanks, Vakafan. That was a good question.
For sure. Okay, so I guess that concludes the amount of time we have, so that's the show for this week. We want to thank all of our fans who contributed questions. Please keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions of your own to the YouTube and SoundCloud pages. And while there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement keeps the show going. You can also catch us on Thursdays on our sister podcast, Reactive Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in pop culture. Now, you know where you can find Vice. He's Vice the Bold on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter. You can follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince, as well as my Twitter page, @LotusPrince.
Wow, we are so nice to Vice. We're advertising him when he's not even on the show. He doesn't do that with us.
I was actually going to say that I don't want to advertise my social media, and that if you have a message for me, just contact Vice the Bold. That's VYSECHEBOLD on PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter.
Yeah, and just like usual, if you find PyroJackFrost and it's me, feel free to talk to me. If it's not me, don't talk to strangers. And if you can't find me, I probably don't want to be talked to.
And in reality, I'm OldManStompy pretty much everywhere that I want to talk to people, and even some places that I don't. So don't take it for granted if you find me somewhere.
Yeah, admittedly, I am Lotus Prince on more things than what I mentioned, but I also am not using those things for social media, which is why I just specify YouTube and Twitter. So thank you all once again for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.